Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me on the Godcast today is Carl Vernon. Now, Carl is a best-selling author, and he is a prolific social media personality with his YouTube channel, which has been viewed millions. I think it's over 34 million times, something like that. Some extraordinary figure. And Carl's an interesting chap. I'm really pleased to get on the Godcast. Carl, how you doing?
I'm really well, Alex. How about yourself, buddy?
Yeah, I'm all right. Whereabouts are you, Carl? Where in the UK
We're
are you?
we're we're in Buckinghamshire, sunny Buckinghamshire, or should I say windy Buckinghamshire, rainy Buckinghamshire.
Where is your accent from? I was trying to detect where it's from. It's quite unusual.
You know what, Alex? I've been accused of being Australian, Scottish, I think, once as well. I mean, I don't know where that came from. I mean,
Right.
I've got I'll try and do a good Scottish impression, but it's the Midlands, it's Leicester.
Right. Okay.
I've been trying to lose it for years, but
Yeah.
it's still there. And yeah, no, I'm from the East Mids. I spent pretty much most of my life in Leicester,
Okay.
so I've still got an East Midlands accent. I was there from the age of 5 up until about being sort of 19, 20. So it's a strong accent. I'm trying to shift it, but it's not quite. It's still there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's still there. Yeah, but it's an interesting one because I like accents and I couldn't quite place yours, but yeah, it makes sense now you've explained it to us. So what was life like growing up in Leicester? Was it all right? Was it happy memories or a bit troubled? How was it?
It certainly goes a long way to make you who you are today. That's probably the nicest answer to that, isn't it? I grew up single parent family, council estate, one of the worst estates in Leicester, an estate called Rowletts Hill. Anybody who's in Leicester might sort of flinch a little bit at that. It's got a bit of a reputation. But as I said, it makes you who you are, doesn't it? I mean, through all the challenges growing up, I spent a little bit of time in foster care, had, personal challenges around the typical sort of things that you'd expect from a single parent, family and things like that. And growing up in a pretty rough estate, it's all the typical sort of challenges you would expect from that. But like anything else, Alex, it either makes you who you are or you get snared and trapped into a lot of what you could define as the system is. What do they expect? It's like a conveyor belt. You end up in a situation. You obviously can't choose as a 7, 8 year old what your situation is, but it's a bit like a conveyor belt. You go into a situation where you spend time in foster care. You're living in a challenging environment, in an environment where there's lots of challenges, and through that conveyor belt, you're expected to sort of come out. But through those challenges, you get to pick as much as anything else. And for me, it was a case of ride those challenges, and then when you get a little bit older, a little bit more conscious about things, you start to make some more conscious decisions. And for me, it was about, well, how can I create something a bit different? Perhaps, how is it that I might not be able to fulfill this type of cycle that is often expected as much as anything else? And so you have to, or I felt I had to break away from a lot of that stuff. But the positives are that you get to keep a lot of the experiences, and they truly do make you who you are today, don't they?
Yeah. So which journey did you take from there? Did you on kind of leaving high school, did you go down the academic route or were you straight into work? How did it play out for you?
Well, the system really grabbed me, but I suppose I'm grateful in the something that I've become a lot more conscious of is things like materialism and flashy cars and big houses and all that sort of stuff. Very sort of surface type stuff, isn't it? Very little substance and meaning behind a lot of the materialism. But I'm grateful for the fact that certainly growing up, one of the things that enabled me to break some of the patterns, break the system a little bit, if you like, was to go after the idea of success. Seeing the entrepreneurs, seeing your Alan Sugars and your Richard Bransons and all the other cliches within that sort of entrepreneurial BS, what it effectively is. The materialism, the chasing after the success, the one in the car and all the rest of it, that's what really sort of dragged me out of the system a lot. And for me, you know, leaving school, I was hardly there, Alex. I just didn't get on with school.
No.
It was a case of, I went to a Catholic school just solely for the purpose that it was one of the better schools within Leicester. And what didn't help was the fact that one of my mates lived literally around the corner from the school. And we used to meet up at the shops down the road, you know, 15, 20 minutes before school started. We'd meet up, there'd be about, you know, 5 of us. And we'd start strolling up to the school gates, and then we'd have a little conversation of, you know, do we go to school or do we go to your house and play the PlayStation? You know, I think it was the PlayStation 1 at that time. So it was a really tricky decision, Alex. And then what we did is we tried to get a little bit smart. So we got somebody, we encouraged a guy, we used to pay him off with chocolate bars and things like that. So what we did is we got real clever. We used to get him to sign us all in to the register. So it didn't look like it looked like we were there. We just turned up late. So in other words, Alex, you know, long story short, I hardly spent any time at school, didn't really get on with it, left school as soon as I could, jumped straight into work, straight into chasing the Yankee dollar, straight into that idea of success, wanting to be rich, wanting to be a millionaire, wanting this car and, you know, this house and this success and those clothes. And that took me on the journey of starting my own business at the age of 20 after working for a few people, specifically in the recruitment industry. Worked for a few people, very quickly sort of realized, hang on a minute, you know, at the age of 20, I'm making this dude quite a lot of money, an incredible amount of money. So, you know, is this fair? You know, am I being shafted? Yes, I am. So started my own business at the age of 21, and then, you know, built it up from there, built up a team, built up a company. And then the journey progressed from there to me realizing that it's all a crock.
Well, yeah, I mean, I love your stories about truanting and that, because that rings a bell in my head very much. So did you fulfill those dreams, Carl? Did you get the big cars and the big house?
I did, yeah. In the I worked my fingers to the absolute bone, and you know, following on from your earlier question, Alex, it was a case of that was very much me clinging on to something that gave me a bit of direction. So now, although I recognize it, being older and wiser, that working every hour under the sun, working your fingers to the bone, suffering with the levels of anxiety and stress and things that I was going through, and the ill health, physical, mental, all of it combined to create the experiences that I went through, dealing with lots of anxiety to the point where, you know, I got to a stage in my life where I couldn't leave my home, through being anxious, through panic attacks, daily panic, and you know, there's lots of issues around that stemming from earlier examples. But yeah, you know, I got the flashy cars for working hard, and, you know, chased after the dollar and got the clothes and all the rest of it. And then the recession hit, what was it, 2008. So after a few years of building the business as a young guy in my early 20s, the recession hit 2008, pretty much wiped me out, wiped out a lot of the recruitment industry, because it became, you know, pretty surplus at a time where not many companies were spending money. So my company pretty much got wiped out. I had to let all the team go. And it was one of the best experiences that I've ever had, because it brought me to where arguably I am today in regards to hitting realizations about materialism, about working every hour under the sun, about what it is that actually really is important.
Yeah, and just, you touched on the anxiety, Carl. What was life like living with anxiety? Was it I know this might sound a bit weird, but did you find a place of comfort with anxiety where you kind of just, this is how it's going to be, and you kind of created a world for yourself, or was it really really a horror story.
Well, that type of question, Alex, infers to me that you know what you're talking about, because ultimately you need to understand it to a certain level to be able to ask that question. And the reason why I think that's an intelligent question in relation to anxiety in particular, Alex, is because when you get to a certain level with it, it just becomes a comfort zone that isn't very comfortable. So you have to build a lifestyle, a resilience. I'll talk from personal examples here, but for me, it was a case of building a life around it. So there was an underlying massive issue that I was masking, that I wasn't dealing with, that was just there. It was constantly there. You know, this is why it's called generalized anxiety disorder, because it's always pretty much there. And, you know, for me, it was a case of, you know, thinking back, you know, I used to describe it, I'd suffered with it for decades. And it's true, because, I mean, I've got the earliest memories of anxiety when I was about 5. So when we were homeless, because we ended up, as we moved to Leicester, being homeless as a family, my mum, me and my brother, we ended up staying in a bus shelter for the first few nights, and it was cold. And these sort of memories at 5, and then we ended up in this sort of halfway home, I think you call it, a place called Border House in Leicester. Just, you know, a place where lots of other desperate families were, homeless families. And it's just memories like sleeping next to the window, hearing the cars driving by, and the sheets and the blankets that they provided were really itchy. And, you know, you have these memories at the age of 5, and you know, what is it that they say? You know, your experiences up to about the age of 7 show the boy and you see the man from that. So in regards to challenges behind stuff like that, and then things like foster care and challenges around some of the things that we've already discussed, it was like it was kind of always this underlying thing from that. So from a very early age, and it was something that I'd never really dealt with. And because of challenges, it was something that I was never open about from an early age. And I think talking, just being able to talk, is probably why I talk so much now, and probably why I do what I do now, Alex, is because before you could have regarded me as if people met me, you'd probably call me a mute. You know, I didn't hardly talk. It was something that, do you know what? I see all these problems around me. And it was like, do you know what? I don't want to burden anybody else. I'll just deal with my own stuff, so you don't talk about anything, which is a big part of the big issue. And then you mask it, and then you pretend. And then before you know it, you live in this lifestyle that is basically just like, it's just a mask. It's not real. You know, there's nothing of substance about it. There's nothing real about it. You're literally just putting on a mask every day, pretending, until the point comes, and this is for a lot of people, because, you know, I've done a lot of coaching as well as before I predominantly do what I do today with social commentary. I've done a lot of coaching for anxiety and stress based on my own personal experience. And it really is, for a lot of people, a mask up until the point where it can't be a mask anymore. You know, there's a breaking point. There's something that happens. There's something like, you know, a breakdown, whatever it may be, that gets to a point where it can't be hidden anymore. And that was similar for me. You know, it was a case of spending my childhood, my teens, and most of my young adulthood living with this mask on, masking it, pretending that everything was okay, surviving rather than living, basically, until it got to a point where, do you know what, it just was a snapping point, and it just couldn't happen like that anymore.
Do you know, Carl, it's fascinating stuff, because in my other world, where I used to, before I was a priest, I worked in management, and now I'm a priest. I deal with a lot of people who I would say are living with anxiety. And what you said about you can only keep it boxed in for so long. And I suppose through experience, I know that point is going to come where it's all going to pour out. And quite often it does. And quite often that is from parents who are perhaps describing children as you perhaps were as well. And I just wonder what that says about society, that still is still an issue, and whether it's, whether anxiety has a cure. What's your thoughts about that?
Whether anxiety has a cure? My thoughts in relation to that, one of the main reasons why I wrote Anxiety Rebalance is because it's my belief that anxiety hasn't got a cure. But actually, I know for some people it might be like, oh, especially if you're dealing with high anxiety. But the good news is that it doesn't need a cure. That's like saying that anger needs a cure. Anxiety is an emotion. So it's really about, this is where the small difference comes in. Whether you're an adult, whether you're a child dealing with anxiety, dealing with stress, it's the small details that count. So to reinforce the idea that anxiety has a cure means that you'll be constantly chasing it and after the cure. I want the cure. Give me the cure. And the issue with that is you're chasing a tail because it doesn't exist. You have to get really defined with the small details to start to overcome anything. You can regard this as anything, any problem, whether it's anxiety, whether it's stress, any sort of problem in your life. It's the small details that are always going to count. When it comes to things like anxiety, the thing that needs to be looked at is the difference between high anxiety and normal anxiety. See, and I want this to relate to everybody where it can as well, because not everybody's going to relate to be dealing with high anxiety on a consistent basis. So just relate this to problems in life, Alex. There's obviously a main difference between dealing with a ton of problems, lots and lots of problems in our life. There's a difference between that and dealing with what you might refer to as a normal amount of problems, because everybody's got problems. And it's the same with emotions. It's the same with anger. It's the same with anxiety, same with stress. We can cause a lot of our own issues by creating a lot more than what there is above the normal or the average. And when we do that, it just fulfills this constant cycle that we just find ourselves living in, where we create comfort zones around it that actually, when we look at it, are not that comfortable.
Yeah.
So what's the solution here? The solution is, Alex, whether you're an adult, whether you're a child, whatever you're dealing with, is to look at it realistically. What am I actually dealing with here? And what am I actually looking for a cure for? Because the idea for most people is that they want a cure to all their problems. Why? What, a life without problems? That sounds dull as you like. I mean, that sounds crap. I know it can sound a little bit cliche, and I think this actually describes our entire situation in the world at the minute as well, Alex, in regards to what's going on. It's through the challenges, it's through the problems that we actually get the rewards. And the grander they are, the bigger they are, the bigger the reward. Yeah. So a life without problems, that's just dull, that's boring. Yeah. Why are we looking for a cure for problems when actually it could be as simple as saying, do you know what? I've got a lot of problems. I've got high anxiety. What do I need to do to start to bring this down to what you might define as more normal levels? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's great. And it makes me think about young people in particular, and I just wonder what there seems to be social media, as you well know, Carl, is wonderful for many things, but it's also quite a vicious hunting ground for other things. And, particularly young people seem to get into this culture of just moving on to your wonderfully entitled book, The Massive Advantages of Dealing with Assholes. And all the answers you need to recognize and deal with toxic people. My goodness me, there's a lot of toxic people online, aren't there? And as parents, we don't always know what's going on in the world of a child and social media. But if any parents watch this, or even kids watch this and think, well, yeah, there's some toxic people in my life. What's the best way to deal with them?
Well, the interesting thing about that, Alex, is that we're all toxic to a certain extent. So that's the one thing that is one of the best appreciations, in my opinion, that you can get to. Now, there is, however, a huge difference between your everyday average toxic person and somebody who's actually going to destroy your life or has the potential to destroy your life. And there's a couple of things that define that. And one of those things is consistency. See, when I say that we can all be ourselves, of course we can. We all make mistakes on a daily basis as well. Like as we're going along on a daily basis, sometimes we don't even intend to be an arsehole, but we're just projecting how we might be feeling. You know, a lot of us just might be just having a bad moment, a bad time, a bad day, a bad bloody month. It doesn't matter. But we've all got the capability of being an arsehole. So the idea that, oh, I'm not an arsehole, you're an arsehole, and everybody else is an arsehole, that's the thing that we need to break free from, is that notion. But the thing that we need to be cautious of, whether it's online, whether it's real life, whether it's somebody close to you, the person who we need to start to become more aware of, or if I'm going to be more direct, actually get out of our lives, is somebody who is intentionally being an arsehole consistently. So the two things that define that is intention and consistency. Yeah, we can all be arseholes, but is there somebody who is intentionally being an arsehole all the time? Because if those two things count, then that's a toxic individual.
Yeah.
The best analogy I use, this brings about some lovely pictures, Alex. So brace yourself for this. It's a little bit like, you know, you've got that vibrant, lovely punch bowl with all the fruit in it and all that vibrant color, and it looks beautiful. But then there's that turd that's floating in it. Yeah. It might even be just a little turd. Either way, you've gone from that punch looks lovely, I'll have a little bit of that, to wanting to run away from it. There's going to be turds in the punch bowl wherever you go. In your life, people close to you, your work, family, whatever it may be, there's always, however you look at it, just based on odds, there's always a turd in the punch bowl. Now, the reason why you have to be very, very aware of it and conscious of it is because all it takes is for that turd in the punch bowl to completely destroy your life potentially. And for me, this might be an interesting conversation, actually, Alex, in regards to your faith, because I don't want to presume anything, but I would imagine that there's a high level of forgiveness in regards to what you practice. If I was to be direct in regards to an example of somebody who is consistent with their intention, then my direct advice is that is a person that you need to avoid, or you need to actually get out of your life, because you owe that person nothing, whoever they may be, and they are simply potentially destroying your life. So right. From a faith point of view, is that tricky?
Well, that depends if you're suggesting that person is Jesus, and if that, you know, if Jesus is that person that gives you a guidance and instruction for life. And I'm not sure if you're suggesting that if you know, this is a perfect kind of figure of example, then to say get that person out of your life, I think that's quite an interesting discussion to have. But actually, for somebody who hasn't been a Christian all my life, who had a foot very much in the real world, I would say, I think there's I get what you're going with it, but I think there's a good argument to say, well, actually, sometimes you need a figure of example, you know, a role model. And when you talk about those things about anxiety and just difficulties, you know, I can only speak for myself, but since I became a Christian and not a fundamentalist Christian, I must say, you know, a very liberal, inclusive Christian, you know, I feel that my life has improved by following Jesus, if that makes sense. And, you know, I'm sure that you may suggest otherwise.
Well, I get it. Of course, I get it. I suppose in regards to what I'm saying, does that mean through your faith, through specifically, as you say, Jesus, does that mean for you that if you put people or put them through the faith of, or put them through Jesus, as you put it, does that mean that everybody deserves forgiveness?
Well, I think there is an argument that everybody does deserve forgiveness, which is a very interesting subject, because when I was trained to be a priest, I think it's important to say that priests aren't just given an easy access. We did a subject on death and dying, and the tutor asked, "Do you think everybody goes to heaven?" And quite naively, I kind of went, "Yeah, I think everybody goes to heaven." And his response straight back was, "Well, is Hitler there?" And I do get those questions and those thoughts, but I do think that there is a need for forgiveness. I was thinking about, it'd be interesting to know, Carl, your thoughts on Katie Price, because you say that we all make mistakes, and we all have an element of being toxic. And I've been there, where I've called Katie Price and slagged her off and this, that, the other, and being critical. But actually, I think yesterday I was reading the Daily Mail article, headline news, Katie Price, trying to give this image of, oh, how sad, but also giving the reality of, oh, this is just fantastic for us. This is fodder for us. This just makes things, and I just feel that in that scenario, my Christian faith has taught me to actually stop and go, I can't keep putting the booting on Katie Price. This person is a woman who's in desperate circumstances, who may well have created her own downfall, but she's a woman with kids. She needs some sort of forgiveness and help and support. And I probably wouldn't have thought like that 10 years ago.
I think there's a couple of issues on that, Alex. Number one is that for some reason, our culture, there's lots of reasons, but our culture is, we have this celebrity culture that actually, when you break it down a little bit, just start to think about it a little bit, it's just because somebody's been on the TV that makes them potentially different, or gives them what is known as the godlike celebrity status, which is the culture nowadays. There's an issue in that. There's many issues that I understand why that is. And the reason why things like celebrity culture is so popular is because what it enables somebody to do as an individual is to detract and project away from their own problems. See, if you're thinking about what Katie Price is doing, or reading about her in a celeb magazine, or watching the news recently, then it takes away from your own problems, because it's like, oh, look at Katie Price, look at what she's doing, right? So it solves that problem for a lot of people, but the issue is all it's doing is masking it, because we're just taking away from our own lives and deflecting away from our own self-worth by putting these celebrities on this pedestal, by making out as though they are somehow greater than we are just because they're on TV. You mentioned Katie Price specifically. And one of the things I'm very conscious about, and I know I've done videos on celebs and things previously, but one of the things that I'm very conscious about is this whole idea of celebrity, and it kind of fits in this materialism as much as anything else as well. It's this fake, fake reality that it creates that takes away self-worth from the individual. Seeing as you've mentioned Katie Price specifically, what I'd say about that is that I don't think there's any coincidence that a particular individual, whether it's a celebrity or not, and maybe this will relate to you, it relates to most people, somebody will know somebody who has a lot of drama in their life. And it's almost like one drama precedes the next. It's like drama after drama after drama. And it's like, how does that person have so much drama in their life? Well, it's not coincidental, right? It's not coincidental in the slightest. for reasons of common sense as much as anything else. But this actually fits again back into the kind of toxic personality, if you like. You kind of got to ask yourself, or get to a stage, and this is where I was talking about particular people who might be in your life. People who have drama after drama after drama, a lot of it is so much out of choice. And it is the only way that they know how to live. They wouldn't know how to live their lives unless they had the drama that was in it. And it was like the drama has to just get worse. The issue with that, it's like a vacuum. It's like a black hole. What it does is it sweeps everybody else in around that person. So it's they're sweeping people in with their drama. So they have all the drama, and then it's this person has to get involved, or that person, because you're close to them, you have to be involved in that. And it just sweeps you in and sweeps you in. This is that type of, whether it's a celebrity or whether it's somebody in your life, it's something to recognize, because the chances are, if somebody is having drama after drama after drama, then the chances are that isn't going to change, however forgiving you want to be. So you have to ask yourself, how much can I help this person if I want to? And how much is that a detriment to my own well-being? Because if the answer to the latter question is, do you know what, this is really affecting me and how I live, I just feel like let's say it's a friend. You've got a friend who's living in drama after drama, and you find yourself being constantly swept into it. Not your choice, but it's like you're constantly sweeping up and you're being dragged in. You have to make a choice. Well, how much is this to the detriment of my own life and my own well-being? I'm being swept in by all this stuff that isn't actually even my cause. I'm not actually even doing any of this. That's just stupid. When you sit back and you start to contemplate on stuff like that, Alex, you start to appreciate, hang on a minute, so much of my potential big problems that I've been putting as big problems that I'm looking for a cure for, so much of that can be solved by me actually taking more control of my life and what I'm doing. What does that include? Well, what are the people in my life doing? They say, I can meet the 5 people closest to you who you spend the most time with and have a good idea and indication of who you are. I think that's so true. It's such an incredible notion. With that in mind, who are the 5 closest people you're spending the most time with? Because that is a really good indication of the quality of your life. If 3 or 4 of those people out of the 5 are drama queens, are toxic people, then what does that say about you? And if that isn't you being true to yourself, then it brings about a whole series of, do I need to change my environment? What do I need to start to look at here? Because all these problems being created, I might be able to bring them back to normal levels if I just spent less time with that person, or I just did this, or I just took more control.
Yeah.
So whether it's Katie Price or someone else, Alex, celebrity or not, let's bring it back to what is relevant, your life. Yeah, and the people that you've got in your life. If people choose to open a celebrity magazine and watch Strictly and and draw in all of those problems because it helps deflect away from their own, your own problems aren't going anywhere. Yeah,
Carl, this is fascinating stuff. I'm just mindful of time. I could talk to you all day, but I just want to ask you about, if you could quickly explain to us how your books came about, and you were self-published and stuff, and also how you kind of built this social media profile, where you have a huge amount of followers. Just tell us a bit about that experience for you before we go our separate ways this morning.
Yeah, books wise, Alex, it's just literally off the back of everything I spoke about in regards to my personal experience. I've not got, as you gather, I left school at 16. I should be illiterate, technically. I was hardly at school, left school at 16, didn't like it. And I've just had to build a lot on experience and common sense. But if we use the experience side of things, I'm not technically trained. I very much, when I was doing more coaching, described myself as a coach. rather than a counselor or therapist. I've not got any technical training. I don't want it. And actually, in regards to my client feedback, that was one of the reasons as to why, one of the key reasons I've been able to help people, is because I get it. I understand it. I've been through it. It's just a personal belief. If we were to take something like anxiety, for example, as a coach, it's my belief that unless you've been through it, felt it, experienced it, been terrified by it and terrorized by it, your true understanding of it is you're going to struggle with that. So, no technical experience, and really in regards to writing the books, what I wanted to do after going through a series of experiences myself, through personal experience of things like anxiety, I thought, I'm going to help as many people as I can. A book, or something, I can get out to a lot of people. And that's really the first book, how it came about with Anxiety Rebalance. I decided, I'm not academic, I'm not technically trained. So I thought, well, how am I going to be able to do this? And I suppose one of the positive things from leaving school at 16 was a mindset that I developed that was ambitious, that was, very focused and goal driven. So I said to myself, how am I going to help as many people as I can, as quickly as I can? So over the process of a few years, I'm writing the book, and I think in the end, it probably took about 3 or 4 years. And then I decided to self-publish, not knowing, being a private person at this time, hardly communicating, being very private, never really wanted to share personal details. So I'm releasing this book thinking, I'm regretting it straight away. As soon as when I say release as well, I mean, like, I didn't really what did I do initially? I think I hardly had any sort of social media, none of that. It was literally a case of, do you know what? I'll start advertising it a little bit. I think I started advertising it on Facebook. Here we go. Brilliant. So it's like, it's not even about that. It's about helping as many people as I can. I remember getting my first message, my first email from somebody who said, oh, I read your book, and it was like literally reading my own personal experience. I related to it so much. And that's when I was like, you know what, even if I've just helped that person, spending years doing it, it's worth it. And then all of a sudden, within weeks, like thousands of people were reading the book. And, through like any other thing that grows, it's through word of mouth or whatever. And before I knew it, it just started to explode, went viral, if you like. And I was getting all these messages, and I put it on Amazon, and then before I knew it, it got to #1 on Amazon, out of millions of books. And for me, the biggest revelation out of all of that was me at the time thinking that my experience was so unique. You become so insulated that you think you're the only person on the planet going through this crap. And to get all these messages from thousands of people saying, you know what, your experience is pretty much exactly the same. I can't believe this. So the book became #1 on Amazon, as self-published. And then really, I started writing some more books around personal experience, around some of the subjects that I'm most passionate about, most recently arseholes. And it's really just gone on from there, Alex. And then in regards to what I do now, if you like, as let's call it a social commentator, basically, I'll just do a few videos on the subjects that I think are important, and try and combine that with a bit of psychology and personal development. The reason I do that now is because I think over the last 18 months, 2 years, has been particularly challenging for a lot of people. And I think throughout this process, I think the media and its backers have really done a job on people's psyche, on people, how they're thinking, what they've actually done to the general public and society actually angers me. So a lot of what I do now is a reaction to that, is to say, do you know what, to my general message through my videos, or at least I try to, is say, well, look, do you know what is really happening? Or, you know, how can we think a little bit more critically is the thing that I want to achieve. And when that is encouraged, when common sense is encouraged, when critical thinking is encouraged, then consciousness, awareness, whatever you want to call it, the expansion to the individual is and can be incredible. It's limitless. And if I can encourage that for a few videos, or through a few books, or for a few things that I do at the minute, then, you know, whatever we're here for, you know, whether it's, you know, an exam, a game, whatever the existence is all about, if I can do that, then, you know, I feel like I'm on the right path.
Yeah. Carl, it's been fabulous. I got to number 2 on my questions.
I told you I talked to
but absolutely wonderful, really, really wonderful. And I'm sure you are going to continue to inspire people with your posts and books. And so thanks ever so much. If you want to check out Carl, just tell people about where they'll find you.
Yeah, best place with all the box and the community and things like that. Everything's carlvernon.com. You'll be able to find it all on there. Yeah,
that's great. And if you want to find out more about me, God knows why you would, just go to www.thegodcast.co.uk. But Carl, thanks for your time, and thanks for coming on the Godcast.
Absolute pleasure.